Hello and welcome to Noble Mind.
Noble Mind is a podcast exploring mindfulness, meditation, and psychology.
Before we get started, I want to invite you to come to Unwind, a free drop-in practice session that I'm leading each week on Zoom. It lasts about 30 minutes and just long enough, hopefully, to fit between all your other tasks and to-dos. Each week, I give a brief science-backed tip to help with stress management or well-being enhancement. Then we spend about 15 minutes in a guided relaxation, meditation, or contemplation practice. Lastly, we end with a few minutes for discussion and personal connection. I encourage people to make the session work for themselves, so if you prefer to call in or keep your camera off, that is just fine. You can get more details and sign up to get the Zoom link and call-in information at drkateking.com/unwind. Hope to see you there. Hello, I'm Dr. Kate King.
And I'm Alex Gukce. In this episode, we talk to Kathryn Lovewell about teaching self-compassion to children and teens, as well as how we can all work with our own inner critic.
Kathryn Lovewell is a dedicated mindful self-compassion certified teacher who has been teaching meditation and self-inquiry since 2006. Kathryn is the best-selling author of The Little Book of Self-Compassion and Every Teacher Matters, Inspiring Wellbeing Through Mindfulness. She is the co-author of the Positive Edge Journal and has recently published her first children's book about self-compassion called The Voices in My Head.
You can learn more about Kathryn, get this episode's show notes, and join our email list at noblemindpodcast.com. We hope you enjoy the show.
So we are here with Kathryn Lovewell. Thank you so much for joining us here on Noble Mind. And why don't you just start us off maybe by telling us a little bit about yourself and your work and what you do in the world.
Thank you so much, Kate. Hi, Alex. I am a mindful self-compassion teacher. That's my number one blessing in life these days. So I have been teaching this work for nearly 5 years now, or practicing the work. And I'm madly passionate about how we can change our internal landscape, the way we speak to ourselves, and lift ourselves up rather than put ourselves down. And yes, my mission now is to tell as many people on the planet that if they are suffering with a critical voice that beats them up and doesn't give them credit where it's due, then that can change.
Thank you. You said you started this about 5 years ago yourself. How did you encounter self-compassion yourself?
Well, it's quite an interesting story. I'd been on the path for a very long time. I was brought up in a Catholic, and so I have a very deep connection with what I would call this sort of really heart-centered love. So I was really blessed to have that as a foundation. But at 18, I wanted to explore more. I felt there was something even bigger, if there is such a thing as bigger than love. So I've been on a spiritual path for a very long time, and I was exploring lots of different things. And I just couldn't really find a way into being as kind to myself as I was to everybody else. I learned some very interesting therapeutic work, and I did lots of personal development from lots of amazing teachers around the world. And this was the missing link. So by this stage, I was a therapist and working with lots of clients, discovering that this core issue seemed to be the same for everybody that I worked with, including myself, this critical voice that would tear us down when our friends were lifting us up. So I actually I said, right, I'm done with this. I invited a core group of friends and people that had been clients that we'd, stayed connected. And I said, right, we're going to roll up our sleeves and discover what is it that is driving this almost like a self-destruct, this unkindness within ourselves. And so I started something called the Self-Love Club. It was literally, us, a group of 8 women in a room, all different stages of our lives, but all suffering from a really harsh, critical voice. Some of us have achieved lots of things. You wouldn't know it on the outside. which is my experience more and more and more and more, actually that perfectionism energy would actually crush some of my friends, myself included. And so we sat down, rolled up our sleeves. I literally got the whiteboard out, drew what does a compassionate human being look like? What does this person say and do? And so we continued to explore. And I don't know whether this deep felt prayer or a request to the universe that we were genuinely hungry to find out how we could change this. And then I received a beautiful email from the lovely Shamash Aladina, who wrote Mindfulness for Dummies and a few other wonderful books. And it was the first mindful self-compassion training in London. And it's like, try and stop me. It's like prayers answered. Oh my gosh, there's a thing called self-compassion. I had no idea. I'd learned about mindfulness. I knew about all this stuff, but you can be kind to yourself when you meditate. What's that? And anyway, so that was the beginning, the real beginning. 3 of us out of that group of 8, we went together, and the rest, as they say, is history. Absolutely transformed my life.
You've written a number of books. The most recent is The Voices in My Head, which is your first children's book.
Yeah.
I wonder if you could tell us more about that.
Yes, this is my real, true love. I have felt really passionate about this, obviously, since I've learnt these skills, but I felt passionately about wanting to inspire children. I've been a secondary school teacher for many years. That was my previous life. And my heart would break when I'd see these wonderful, talented, funny, beautiful young people putting themselves down, hating who they were, and being mean to themselves, believing that they couldn't do what they were doing, or even when they'd achieved something amazing. I used to teach art and drama, and I would witness some of the most extraordinary pieces of creativity. And it wasn't enough. It wasn't good enough. It was rubbish. It was, all this sort of language would come out, and it would be heartbreaking. And anyway, so education has been my thing. My prayer was that I would change the face of education, that this was honestly, I go big when I have a prayer, and I wanted our children to have some skills, some tools to know that they were okay, whether they got a C grade or an A grade, that they were okay, could be kind to themselves, and that the system could be a little bit kinder as well. And so after a long struggle with the education system, I had to gently retreat. Things have changed over the last sort of 10, 15 years. Wellbeing, language, kindness, compassion, it's all starting to come in. But when I went into schools, I left formal teaching to come back in and work with young people in this way. Even the word meditation was frowned upon and feared for and such like. So anyway, that's my connection with education. And a couple of years ago, I was over in Australia giving some introductory talks around mindful self-compassion in a city in Melbourne. And their focus is to become the first city of Wellbeing. I mean, they had this amazing, extraordinary vision. The project leader, a wonderful lady called Edwina Ricky, she invited me over because I challenged it. They're doing a lot of positive psychology. And I said, self-compassion is the missing link. Self-compassion is a missing link in all this work that you're doing with young people. And of course, I'd written Every Teacher Matters, which is really focusing on how we can support teachers to be well in themselves, to stay steady in all the storms that we have in education, in the classroom and outside of the classroom. Self-compassion, I hadn't learned that then, so it was missing in the book. So anyway, we had this wonderful opportunity, and we toured all the schools, and we invited the teachers to open the door to self-compassion for themselves and to learn about how they could support their children. Obviously, there's a lot of primary schools, and some of the teachers said, are there books about this? Have you written a book about this? So there was the invitation.
I wonder if you'd introduce our listeners to Booster and Crusher.
Of course, it would be my pleasure. So we have, obviously, it's a very complex subject, the critical voice and this compassionate voice. My passion and aim is to create some simplicity around it. So this is how these 2 characters were born. So Crusher is the critical voice. My imagination of what my critical voice looks like. Welcome to my grubby critical voice. So very mean and rude.
And green.
He's swampy. I looked very carefully about, shall he be grey? Because he just brings me down. But no, he's swampy. He's got a bit of depth. Anyway, so Crusher is the voice in my head that says, you're rubbish. You can't do this. You know, who do you think you are? All of those destabilizing, critical responses to daring to be myself, or wanting to do something really nicely, or how I look, or how I feel about how I look, and so on. This is all as obviously as a child. And, you know, the voices in my head are simply looking at little scenarios and how Crusher responds to those. So if I've been doing some colouring, and this really was me, if I slipped outside the line, I would really beat myself up. I hated it. I used to get so cross at myself. And so Crusher is that voice, gruff and highly critical. And of course, what we've got is the antidote to this critical voice. And that is, of course, Booster. And Booster is full of colour and acceptance. We fall over, we make a mistake, we break something. It's like, it's okay. You know, accidents happen. So there's a real humanizing, gentle, encouraging voice that can support us, very different from the voice that would put us down.
I love it. Yeah. Very relatable as grown-ups as well, as you're saying. I mean, just looking through the book, it's just, you know, so very easy to connect to.
It really is. And my hope is that young children will need it to be read to them. You know, it's a bedtime moment and it's let's snuggle up and have a chat as we turn the pages. It's one of my favorite things in the world when my boys were little. And then the discussion can open much wider. And this is where I'm hoping that family communication will be radically different. There'll be a shared language so that, you know, a 5-6-year-old could say to Daddy, oh, Daddy, did Crusher get you today at work? You've got grumpy trousers on. What happened? And it gives the adult permission to say, yeah, I didn't feel like I did a good job today. Something as simple, I've done this, forgotten the packed lunches or the special dressing up day or the correct book, or I forgot to sign the homework to say you read that story yesterday night and they got in trouble and I am the worst mother in the world. If the language, you know, is embedded in a family, then there's just this opening for us to be human and to be kind and to let ourselves off the hook a bit instead of beat ourselves up in a very simple, clean, clear way that hopefully conversations can happen without judgment showing up that we should be a particular way. I worked with one lovely young boy, and he was 10, and it was an implicit message that he should be reading more grown-up books by then. He was very, very bright. But he really liked the silly books he was reading. They were fun. We had to develop a language to help him understand and his parents understand that that's okay to still want to, light relief, have some, you know, they're very jokey and silly. And what if we were able to be that kind to ourselves all the time?
I also think that the language of Booster and Crusher is really helpful for parents who themselves are grappling with figuring out how to be more self-compassionate or just don't even really know how to do that, you know, because I know a lot of people I talk to who are parents are always sort of struggling with like, how do I instill the right sort of messages to my kids when maybe they're still trying to grow and heal themselves. So having something you can grab onto, like, well, what would Booster say? Is like, I didn't even have to come up with what the self-compassionate thing is to say, because sometimes people can't figure it out themselves, you know, how to be compassionate or self-compassionate or to encourage that in your kids. But at least being able to say like, oh, is that Booster? Oh, is that Crusher? It at least starts you off on a different direction than, you know, what you might otherwise do.
Exactly. And I think this is, as a parent, I really wanted to, I still do, want to be the best parent I could be. I want to help my sons as best I can. I want to be there for them. I want to support them. I don't want them to suffer. I mean, everything that we want for any loved one. But where we can lean, which I definitely did, was to try and fix them.
Mm-hmm.
And this can have a really detrimental effect that suddenly, oh, you think I need fixing, do you? Is there something wrong with me? And suddenly we go down that terrible rabbit hole because I certainly didn't have the skills of true compassionate listening, where I'm in a place of allowance and acceptance that actually, what if this suffering is for them and it's okay, and to give them space and that they've got it handled. That's been a very big lesson for me, hugely. And I do listen and keep my mouth shut a lot more now because my sons are young men now, but that desire to want to keep them safe and happy and fulfilled, and, that doesn't seem to go anywhere. And so there's this space that if we simply have, what would Booster say? We can give the power straight back to our children. And say, you do know, my job now is to invite every young person I work with, actually every adult I work with, they know their heart. And that is the most powerful thing I can offer anyone. It's, can you hear it? Can you receive it? And that takes, as Chris German calls it, the U-turn, can I bring all that love and kindness that I give to others? Can I give that to myself? And Booster's just the most magnificent way of helping us tune in really easily. I've experimented with my grads, to be honest, and they just love the opportunity to draw their own booster. The most extraordinary connections happened that I wasn't expecting. I've seen it with the children that we've been exploring with as the Voices in My Head was being created. But it's extraordinary. It brings the compassionate voice alive, makes it more accessible and tangible in a way that I never imagined. It's amazing.
Reading The Voices in My Head, so to describe it to our listeners, it's a large format children's book, very colorful. And as an adult looking through it, I could certainly feel, I could feel all those things.
It's so great to hear you say that. This is the thing, it is universal. This doesn't go away. Just different challenges, different situations, in grown-up situations, same. There's a younger person inside us that really still ultimately wants to be loved and accepted for who we are, would really love to receive praise and encouragement when things are difficult, or if we've done a good job. It's really nice to receive that acknowledgement. And if we cultivate Booster's voice in our own head, then we can give that to ourselves without needing to go outside of ourselves.
I think there's a way that the self-critical voice starts to think it's needed. So it starts to become very scary to let go of it, or to think maybe it doesn't have it all figured out or something. So I don't know, it sort of then kind of festers. I'm thinking about the swampy crusher. It sort of festers in some way, and it's harder to let go of if you think it's been part of what's led to your success.
I think this is such a brilliant point, Kate. I was speaking to a gentleman yesterday who rang me and was asking about, the course and, how do we learn? What does it involve? Can I really do that? And the core fear he said, well, this voice inside my head has motivated me. He was coming up to 60 and he said, well, it's done me fairly well, most of my life, using the stick rather than the carrot. And absolutely, there was nervousness there about, well, if I did it differently, I definitely have people on a regular basis saying, well, will I just lie in bed and sit and eat chocolates all day? Because I'll be being kind to myself, all of that natural resistance. Because I think certainly in Western culture, it is drive harder, work harder, no pain, no gain. All of these messages are the antithesis of, I wonder if you could be kind to yourself. That's just so alien. Well, what's the kindest thing? We've got these little bands that we made, and they simply remind us, what's the kindest thing I can do for myself right now? Now, the kindest thing may be to go for a run. The kindest thing may be to go to bed. The kindest thing may be to reach out and ask for help. And that, once again, I don't know what's going to be the kindest thing. I don't know really ultimately what you need. Only you know that. And sometimes that's even too hard. I certainly wasn't sure what I needed when I was asked that question. But the kindest thing, what is kind right now? And it may be to have a break. Maybe I'll be more creative if I do have a break. And it's a different way of approaching that idea of you just whip yourself to get back on the horse and work harder and just achieve. And what's sad is, of course, Crusher gets a really bad rap. Now, for obviously our younger readers, I'm keeping it very simple. We're not going to go into the next phase of actually how powerful and important Crusher is. And there can be, that's going to be another book for a slightly older age range, learning to make friends with Crusher. That's the exquisite gift of Crusher, really, ultimately, when we understand there's protection and safety and underlying love right underneath that voice. Now, if you'd said that to me 5 years ago, I'd say, who are you trying to kid? Have you heard his voice? And I say he just because I had a he energy, not because Crusher is only a he. It's going to be different for each person, regardless of your own gender. But there is kindness under there, and it's quite extraordinary. Just methodology, pretty clunky. Not
right. Yeah.
So relating to the inner critic is quite key also. That we can't be drawn into a boxing match which we can't win.
No, exactly. In the early days when we're little, in fact, one of the feedbacks I've had from another colleague and friend over in Canada, and she said, what if her grandson's only 4 and Crusher was too scary for him? Mm. It was just too much. And so this is, there's the caveat already. No, obviously parents know their children. So she just read him just the booster section. Because so in the early days, we want to really, really grow and cultivate this compassionate voice to know that we can reach out for that voice when we fall over in the playground, when we feel silly and forget our lines in the school play, when your painting doesn't look anything like a daffodil, whatever, is supposed to look like. And then when we have that beautiful bedrock, if we can get that bedrock in, we know we've got that seed in place always, then of course we can begin to understand, yes, the Crusher actually wants to make sure you don't make an oaf of yourself in this school play. So he's telling you, do you really want to do the audition? And then we can start developing our understanding that there is support even in that gruff unkindness.
To underline a little bit for our listeners, you mentioned the kindness bracelet, which is a silicone bracelet with the writing, what's the kindest thing I can do for myself right now?
So this was born because Liz, my co-teacher, and we noticed our graduates needed something to actually write from the beginning. When we are unconscious to our critical voice, some people come to our class say, actually, I'm interested in the mindfulness bit, but I don't think I have a critical voice. We're like, okay, well, just see how you go. Because we don't know any different. If we've had a mean voice in our head all the time, that's just the voice in my head. So this bracelet is really, it serves just like the breath or soles of the feet. It's a little anchor. It's a reminder so that I take mine off every morning and put them back on. And straight away, I'm reminding myself I can be kind to myself if I'm not feeling very well, or if the body's sore, or if maybe there's overwhelm showing up because it's a big day. I will pop my bracelets on and there's my reminder. And I don't know whether you noticed, but I'm wearing 2. And I do that because I love the pay it forward philosophy. And so no matter what I'm doing, who I'm working with, where I am, I know that if I ever meet anyone that's in distress and I can possibly help, I will stop and be with them. And if it feels appropriate, I will just give them the bracelet and say, I wonder, can you answer this question? And it's just a beautiful way in that I hope is supportive and kind, not patronizing when someone's really struggling. And of course, then the answer is theirs. It's not that, oh, I think you ought to get yourself a drink, or, well, let's find you a hostel. We met a lady, a homeless lady in the Tube in London, and she was sobbing and sobbing and sobbing. She was in a terrible state. And actually the kindest thing when we started to have a conversation was we just needed to find her some tissues to start with. She just really needed some tissues. So we went off and found tissues. The police were really fantastic. They gave us time and space. And then we could look again. Well, what else? What's the kindest thing? Do you have somewhere to stay tonight? Do you have enough money for the hostel? And so it can be a big situation. It could be a small situation. And what I'm really excited about is my son now, he's 20. He's 21 soon. And he's really cool. My younger son, the cool one of the family. And he's so cool. He's not afraid to talk about his feelings. He just blows me away. And he came to me and said, one of my mates, who's a professional footballer, I'm struggling, Mum. Can I have some of your bracelets? And this began this really beautiful, he just hands them out. And it gives our young people permission to say, actually, yeah, I'm not coping. I'm really struggling. This is hard right now. And I think the situation we're in at the moment is hitting everyone in different ways, and it's really hard. But our young people that are literally hardwired for connection and togetherness and this energy that being together that they can't have. We're in lockdown still in London, So the bracelet is simply an offering. It's a reminder. Every graduate receives one when they complete the 8-week course at Kind Mind Academy. And anyone that we talk to, we basically have a bracelet. And so now we're hoping it will spread so that some of the different parts of the NHS, the National Health Service in the UK, when they've done Wellbeing days and things before all this, this challenge happened. So it's staff receiving a bracelet saying, we care about you, that you matter, you are allowed to be human. And so we're hoping that it will eventually spread and spread and spread, and people will be able to pay it forward.
That sounds like a great idea.
I wonder if it would be helpful if you could tell us a little bit more about your Kind Mind Academy and maybe walk us through the sort of structure of how that program works.
Why, certainly. So Kind Mind Academy was born, goodness knows, I don't know how many years ago now, maybe 5 or so, with my co-teacher, Liz Walker. And we began simply because we wanted to bring our focus front and center to self-compassion. We teach the mindful self-compassion training that Chris Germer and Kristen Neff are founders of. They created the mindful self-compassion training. And we simply offer as many different ways in for people to experience and lots of support afterwards. So there's an 8-week course, which we give regularly throughout the year. We also offer silent retreats. So those silent retreats are self-compassion focused. They're usually 5 days. And we also offer lots of different things for our graduates. So one of the things that is still, I think, quite challenging for many teachers is how do we encourage our graduates that this isn't just this was a nice course, thanks very much, and then go away and don't practice anymore. It really is dose dependent. Kristen's demonstrated through her research, it is dose dependent. You do need to practice, but there's lots of lovely informal practices. And I think this is the key personally. You don't have to sit on your cushion to make this change, to start to cultivate a compassionate way of being for yourself. It's really powerful. And actually, I think it's those little gestures, bringing it to life every day, catching that critical voice, changing it. Actually, I will have a sit down and a cup of tea. That's probably what I'd say to my best friend if they were exhausted. So that it's, anyway, so we've created lots of fun things for our graduates. We have a program called Keeping Your Practice Alive. We meet once a month. That's a year-long program where we dive deeply into a particular topic. And then we have a month to practice and play and see how we go with that. And then we come back and report back, and then we learn another one. So I love keeping your practice alive. That's really great. So that's for anyone that's, done the course. We have a book club, which is we use the MSc workbook. We thought we'd do a different book each time, but our grads we keep just coming straight back to that workbook. There's so much in it. And what we're discovering, that's a 12-week course, consecutive weeks, is that we're just unraveling, and we meet the work from a different place each time. Sometimes, I've had grads say, is this a new bit in the book? I don't remember before.
Right.
And then they look again and think, well, I've written notes on it. But we hear it when we hear it, don't we? So that's really good. And we also offer a lovely opportunity to come together. Since COVID began, we created something called Compassion Hour, just a free come together online for an hour on a Friday, just to be together, to be honest, to be in a safe space, to say, actually, this is really hard, but to have a little practice together. And we go out into what we call our common humanity clusters. We go into little breakthrough rooms, and it just gives people some privacy and some space. So that's been a really nice, supportive thing. And I do a Facebook Live every Wednesday, which is my attempt. This goes back to your question, Alex, about, how do we reach people? How do we get the message out there? And this is just my humble offering of, here I am, a compassionate mess, one day at a time. And we just talk about real stuff. So when I lost my cousin last year, there's these various different episodes of, oh, this is really hard, and this is how self-compassion helped me. And, different things with family and work and just getting real. So that's called MSc Bite Size. So we just have 30 minutes together exploring, a topic. I love being real with people. It's not, whilst the conceptual philosophical approaches to it are fascinating, I love it, I do want to inspire people that they can just roll up their sleeves, that they can pick up the tools straight away.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. It's not super complicated. It's just hard because it goes against so much patterning that we've already had laid down.
Exactly. So yes, Kind Mind Academy, it's just we've got a wonderful community of graduates now. We have a WhatsApp group. People share on that all the time. They share photographs of their Sense and Savor walks, especially during lockdown. They've been really lovely for some of our graduates who can't get out, and sharing poems and the highs and lows. It's a really supportive space. I'm really lucky we've got such a great group of graduates that want to keep their practice alive.
You referenced Sense and Savor walks. I'm intrigued.
Sorry, I know. Using the lingo. Simply a beautiful way I like to pretend I'm a bumblebee. And, I'm drawn to a lovely flower, and I can drink in the nectar of that flower, be with it, just soak up. So use all my senses. I might touch the flower, smell the flower, enjoy all the different colours and textures of that flower. I don't usually eat them, I have to say. Pour out of the fire. Yes. And then when I'm full, and then I can just fly off to another flower, or a piece of bark, or look up at the sky, or notice some interesting leaves on the ground, or whatever it is. So it literally is, it's one of my favourite things to be out. I mean, you can have a Sense and Savor walk in your bedroom. It doesn't mean that it has to be these beautiful natural things, but so we're meeting something delightful for the first time. So I pick up my mug, and maybe I've forgotten to notice the lovely flowers that have been painted on my mug, and the lovely saying, do small things with great love. So I may land there for a while and really be with that. Then I may spend some time enjoying the warm tea inside. So I'm using my senses to savor. And this really helps when things are difficult as well. It realigns us and lifts us up, and gratitude normally pours out of the heart. That's my experience anyway.
It's so different than how we relate to our normal everyday like our normal everyday headspace is so different than a practice like this, because so often we're sort of task focused and moving ourselves through the next thing on the to-do list, or sort of organizing how we're going to strategize our way through. At least that's my day. So then being able to go from the ground up and just say, okay, now is the time to just feel and experience what's happening and let my curiosity or, delight be the thing that moves me towards, ooh, my mug, ooh, a flower, ooh, a thing. That's such a welcome relief, even just for a few minutes, to let that be the guide.
Yes, and it might only be for a few minutes. I love what we term as a soft landing, like a mini meditation. So before I came on today, I gave myself a little soft landing because, the butterflies were in my tummy and I wanted to do it just right. So I heard all these voices coming up. So I had a little soft landing, and we can give ourselves these little moments and bring ourselves back. It doesn't have to be anything really big. We literally are stopping and smelling the roses, as that phrase goes. And I was speaking with giving meditation yesterday for the Centre for Mindful Self-Compassion. I volunteer for the global circles of practice, and I invited everyone, well, what if instead of having a to-do list on January the 1st, what if we had a to-be list? How do I want to be today? And I can't take any credit for this genius. It was my happiness leader at the time, many, many years ago. And so I put, well, how do I want to be? How do I want to feel in my office when, as you say, the overwhelm, the noise in my head starts to get really loud, and oh my gosh, everything seems to be in the emergency box. Like Stephen Covey's,
right.
Emergent, what is it? Important and urgent. It's like, everything's in that box. I want some on the other side.
Yeah, who has unimportant, unurgent tasks?
Why is there even a box for that? Yeah, exactly. So it's this way of reminding ourselves that we can be for a moment. And it is a regular practice. I'm not pretending to be brilliant at any of this. I still can get tangled up in my rushing list and, oh my gosh, that deadline, and, everything becomes an emergency. And then I come back and I begin again. But I think what's different is that I am kind to myself when I catch myself at the game. That's the exquisite difference. I'm gentler. I'm supportive. I say, okay, all right, fear's here. What do you need? And so this kind voice, the booster's voice, with practice will show up before crusher's voice. Pull yourself together, for goodness sake, Kathryn. What are you messing about? I told you should have done this yesterday. Now, if you'd just done it yesterday, and all of those human things, and even if crusher's voice shows up, I can say, oh, I know, you just want to protect me. You did really want me to get this right. I know I've left it to the last minute again. I know, Crusher, when will I ever learn? And can you, the energy of it's so, so different. So I'm
yes.
friends with who's up there now.
Right.
I mean, there are studies that show all sorts of amazing changes in people's life as a result of self-compassion and loving kindness practice.
Exactly. I mean, thanks to Krista Neff, I haven't had to do any of the research. There's and a lot of other researchers out there. We all understand that we have neuroplasticity happening. We know that the brain is going to grow new pathways if we practice them. That's so fantastic. We can literally relearn anything. We can grow. And even grow from the tough stuff. So all of that brown stuff becomes really rich manure. We did a workshop with the Museum of Happiness recently, and it was focused on Thich Nhat Hanh's quote, "No mud, no lotus." So finding the lotus in any of the mud, well, what's that? And of course, that's another muscle. I can always see a silver lining now. It's just a gift I have now, oftentimes even in the moment of the suffering, in the moment of the difficulty, even when, you get the phone call from school and you think, uh-oh, Bless him. I won't name any names. But there's a new way of looking, a way of seeing. It really is quite extraordinary. And the magic of the brain connecting with the heart. And we know, of course, the electromagnetic waves from the heart are so much stronger than the brain. Who knew? And this, I think MSC really helps us make that connection mind, body, heart. We do connect with soothing touch. We do use our hands, our whole body to experience, hence, something like sense and savor. We're using all our senses, and we can employ those to really develop that compassion, self-compassion muscle.
Well, this has been a lovely conversation. Wondering if you could tell our listeners a little bit about where to find you, and if they're interested in hearing more from you or studying with you, where should they go? What should they do next?
Oh, that would be lovely. Thank you. kindmindacademy.com. You can message me there very easily. There's lots of wonderful courses available. If you want to do the 8-week course, there's a new one starting January 16th. You can find all the information there. Just go to the courses tab. You could also find me on the Centre for Mindful Self-Compassion, which is, I'll spell it the correct, your way. CenterForMSC.org, Centre for Mindful Self-Compassion.org. And I have a teacher profile there as well, so you can see all the different, we're doing some wonderful silent retreats. There's a silent retreat coming up in January as well. We've got, fingers crossed, an in-person one still. There's a few places left. We'll see if that happens in June. So you're very welcome. It's very easy to contact me. You're very welcome to, if you've got any questions. I'd love to hear from anyone that's interested in learning more.
Fabulous. Thank you so much, Kathryn.
Thank you so much for having me.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thanks for listening today.
If you enjoyed this episode, we hope you'll hit subscribe, leave us a great rating or review, and spread the word. You can also go to noblemindpodcast.com to join our email list. You'll get a weekly behind-the-scenes message, news, announcements, and other special goodies we come up with just for you. Thanks for listening, and bye for now.